Dad, what if we go to the store and get all of the ingredients to make Cool Ranch Doritos, and then we make them tonight after school? And I was like, Joseph, it's like, that is a great thing to do. However, Cool Ranch Doritos are ultra-processed foods. And by definition, we cannot make them in our kitchen. Like, we don't have the tools, the machinery to actually make that. I was like, because I'm sure you've had a tortilla chip, right? And a tortilla chip and a Cool Ranch Dorito, they do not taste the same at all. And, for me, like, that's the crux. And I do a lot of work with student athletes, high school student athletes, collegiate student athletes, and then also, with my own kids. And that's one of the things, like, with ultra processed foods, really talk about like the word ultra processed food with them as much, but these are things that we can't make in the kitchen. Yeah. And we have to be aware that these things are also really easy to consume. Yeah. Like, you could, like, I laugh, like, you could take a Pizza Hut pizza, which is not the same one that they had when we were kids, right? And you could, if you had no teeth, you could still eat it.
Right. You can gum that. Just gum it right down.
Right, which is one of the things, like, one of the characteristics of, with ultra-processed foods, there's a research study showed that you can eat more calories per bite, like, faster.
Yeah, so let's actually talk about this. Are you talking about the Kevin Hall study?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll quickly walk through that. This guy, and I'm probably going to get the specifics wrong, but basically what this guy did is he took a group of people, put them in, like, a metabolic ward, right? And which is where you're counting. Actually, you walk us through it. You have the PhD. What am I doing here?
It was good. No, I was drinking my tea and getting ready to hear it. So basically, these metabolic wards, there aren't a lot of them because they're pretty extensive, but it's an extreme controlled environment where they're measuring gas exchange from the people that are there. They're weighing and measuring all the food that's going in. So they truly know what has entered the human and what has exited the human from down to the periodic table of elements. Yeah. And you could do some really cool research, but there aren't a lot of places that have these facilities, as you can imagine.
Not cheap.
Yeah. And so what they started, one of the things they did was they were looking at ultra processed foods versus non-processed foods and consumption patterns, and when they provide people with food, what happens. And one of the most interesting findings is that with ultra processed foods, you can just eat more calories per bite and more calories per time than non-processed foods.
Yeah.
And that is something that people don't consider.
So, and in the study, they fed them meals that were matched, very similar meals. They're matched for, like, protein, and they basically, like, shove the food into the ward, and they say, okay, eat until you're full. And so for whatever it was, a week, they're eating these non-processed versions of the food. The other week, they're eating the ultra-processed versions of the food. And then they're saying, okay, well, how much did people actually eat? And we told them, like, just eat until you're full. When they eat the ultra-processed version, they eat about, it's like 500 extra calories a day. And it goes back to the fact, to your point about you can just gum this stuff down and it's not as filling. People just eat the food faster and there's more calories per bite in general. So if you're eating faster and the food has more calories, all of a sudden you've eaten a lot more food without necessarily meaning to or realizing. And then that in turn, where the whole health argument comes in, is that you get people who end up eating more than they're burning food-wise. So people gain weight, and then health problems come in when people tip into obesity, more or less. So it's not like the ultra-processed food, I mean, maybe you could argue it is. It's not like it's inherently evil. It's more just people tend to eat more of it, and when you eat more of something, you might tip into obesity, and then there's health implications with that.
Yeah, I think your verbiage of inherently evil is a good one, because I think when we start putting this, like, evil versus good veil over foods that we eat, companies that make the food, etc., it's not very useful, because I actually think these different kinds of foods have utility in different places. And with young athletes, it's a wonderful dichotomy, because for a young athlete who's burning a lot of calories, to meet their calorie needs, to do it with what I would consider minimally processed foods. So these are foods essentially in their natural is such a loaded term, and so I apologize for using it. Like natural state, like imagine a carrot, right? Or something that's been manually processed to extract a nutrient, like olive oil, right? So the olive has been squeezed, the oil is extracted, and so you have olive oil. So those two. There's like this 4-tier system for food processing. Those are the first 2 tiers, and I group those together and just call them minimally processed foods.
Yeah.
So another example, like oats, for example, would be a minimally processed food. Like it's been manually mashed, so you can actually consume it.
Yeah, and then just so people kind of understand, the ultra processed version of like let's take oats for an example. If you just have the oats that have been rolled over, so you can have them in your oatmeal. That's minimally processed. But when you take the oats and you bind them in sugar and you throw in chocolate chips and raisins and like sugar dusting and frosting on the top, and now you have the sort of like oatmeal bar, now we're getting into ultra processed territory. And you're wrapping it, you're throwing in all these preservatives, you're doing all these things so it'll sit on the shelf for a long time. 1, 2, it will taste so much damn better than your plain oatmeal. Like it's just like this explosion of flavor in your mouth.
So the next one would be there's unprocessed, and then it's depending on how you look at it, like culinary or manually processed, which is like the oat, and then there's processed foods. Processed foods you could still make in your own kitchen, and they usually have salt, sugar, fat added to them, or some preservatives, right? So salt is often a very common preservative. So processed foods that generally people love, like a nice salami, like that sort of thing, sausage, like that food is also delicious, but it's a processed food because they've added the salt and some of the maybe nitrates for the preservative. So in your example of oatmeal, something I grew up on as a kid just because we didn't know any better, like the apple cinnamon instant oatmeal packets, right? Yeah. So they take that, they've added sugar to oatmeal, that becomes processed. Ultra processed would be one step further, which you further elaborated. They've added other things. It's now a bar. It's coated in this delicious coating. You could not make this because you don't have an extrusion machine in your kitchen, right? So you couldn't make it, and it'll last on the shelf for 2.5 years. So that would be ultra processed. And that's like the evolution of these things.
Yeah.
And just because it could last for 2 years and is coated in sugar, and you could probably eat it without teeth, that doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. Because if I'm looking at an athlete who is playing 2 games in 90-degree weather with a 50-minute break in between, what I need that athlete to eat in between is something that they're going to be able to consume very quickly, taste good because they're going to want to eat it because they're too hot to really want to consume, but we need to get them the calories, something that's going to be digested quickly. Like basically most of what would check the box for an ultra-processed food. And so it really becomes down to where are you going to use this food in your life? That's where ultra-processed foods can be really good. Protein powder is a great example. Protein powders, definitely. Like try making whey protein isolate in your kitchen. Like good luck, right? Like you can't get an ion exchange whey extractor off of Facebook Marketplace. But
I don't know. You ever been to Vegas? I think I could probably get you one in about 20 minutes.
But that is a great food. That's a great nutritional tool to have, and it helps all kinds of people meet their protein needs on a consistent basis. So, where we started talking about this, talk about the Kevin Hall study and ultra-processed foods that you can eat them faster and they taste better, that's really where the problem comes in, because you would look at something and say, I'm going to eat this because it's less expensive, more convenient. Oh, by the way, it also has 500 calories. And you can eat it in 6.5 seconds.
Yeah. I think
that's the problem.
An extreme example would be, let's say you had 2 slices of Domino's pizza. Anyone could eat that in 2 minutes, and you would go, you know what sounds great right now? A 3rd slice of Domino's pizza. If you had 500 calories in apples, oh my God, you could probably only eat 3 of them, which would be 300 calories, and they'd be like, oh my God, I'm so full off of these apples. I do not want to eat another apple for at least 24 hours. And so then you do the math and you're like, oh, I could see how if you were eating mostly less processed food, you're just going to end up eating less over the course of a day compared to if you're getting your food mainly from ultra processed stuff. And so it just pushes people into too much effectively.
Exactly.